Alright, we're back for part 2. This is the making of the actual dough. If you have not seen part 1, this is not going to make any sense. So you should go watch part 1 first. But just to summarize, basically in part 1 we made the Biga, which is the pre-ferment. I actually made that not last night but the night before, and I just didn't get a chance to make the bread yesterday. Too many other things going on. And like I said in that video, you can let this sit in the fridge up to 3 days. So we have the Biga, it's in my tin. And before I take that out and show you how we're going to break that up, first thing I got to do is measure out the other ingredients for the dough. So I got the water over here measured already. Because I don't have to measure everything. You don't have to see me measure everything. It's going to be, same process over and over again. Got my big proofing bowl here. I'm just going to put it on here and hit the tare button. Here's the part where I hope I have enough bread flour, otherwise I got to go into the closet and get more out. So we'll see. I need 479 grams. Let's see what happens. Oh, nice. Alright. A little bit more than I need. So good. That means I have some for kneading. I don't have to go dig around the closet right now and get more. Good. Okay, so we got that. And the rest of the stuff is going to get measured on the little scale. So, done with this because I did the water already. Let me put this out of the way here. Alright. So, same thing, little scale, little bowl. And remember, everything's going to go in with the flour, the yeast, the salt, a little bit of sugar, which you don't have to do, which, I don't know, I've been thinking about not doing that as well, but we'll see. The yeast that I'm using, by the way, is this stuff, Saf Instant. Works great. It's very long lasting. I've had this batch in here somehow for like 5 years, which is way past the date, but who cares? Works great. I haven't had any problems. It still works. You just keep it in the fridge. You could keep it in the freezer as well. And yeah, so let's measure out some stuff. What do we need? We need 4.7 grams of yeast. Okay, let's do that first. Obviously, you can see there's a little more yeast in this part of the dough than there is in the Biga. So otherwise, your Biga would be like exploding over your, through the fridge, even at that temperature. Okay. I use the same bowl again. It's already tared for that weight. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of sugar. Just 10 grams of sugar. It's not a lot. I guess it just gives the yeast something to eat. Okay. It's going to go in there too. Here's another non-calandras ingredient, but this helps with the browning at our home oven, and it's good. So this is diastatic malt powder. This is from a company called Anthony's. I don't know. Got it on Amazon, I guess. Seems to be where everyone gets everything. They have some other brands on there. It's all the same stuff, I guess. What do we need of this? I can't remember the whole recipe. 7.23. I don't even think my scales are exact. I don't know. So we'll go with like 7.3-ish. Yeah, that's good. And the other thing we need, very important, is salt. I'm going to use just kosher salt. It's readily available, cheap, easy. Thing is, when you're doing, if you're not weighing the ingredients and you're doing, volume, measurements, you're going to have to really think about the salt. Because, so this is, diamond crystal kosher salt. Kosher salt is actually hollow, apparently. The crystals are hollow inside. So they're not just ground larger, but they're actually larger. There's more air, apparently, or whatever, within them, or something like that. I don't know, that's what I read. And so you actually need more kosher salt than you would like a sea salt or a table salt. So the issue there is if you're measuring out a teaspoon or whatever, you're going to end up with something different depending on the salt that you use. So whereas if you weigh it, doesn't matter what kind of salt you use, you're going to end up with the same result. Okay? So I need 20 grams of salt. Which, when you're measuring this, you may think, wow, that's a lot of salt. But remember, this is going to, really expand into 2 pretty large breads. And if you undersalt the bread, you're going to be disappointed. Unless you're making Tuscan bread, which has no salt in it. Which I did think about making one of these into a Tuscan bread today, because I have a bunch of leftover minestrone. And I was thinking, I can make ribollita, but nah, I don't want to do that right now. Just focusing on this. Okay, so we got the yeast, we got the salt, we got the sugar, we got the diastatic malt, and we have the flour. That's all of our dry ingredients. And we got the water over here, like I said. So, put the scale over here too. Alright. I'm just going to mix this up with the whisk, just like I did the other day. It's basically the same idea, just has a few other ingredients. Okay, now I'm going to put a little bit of flour on the board here, which actually probably is not necessary, but here's our Biga. It's really stuck, but it doesn't matter. I didn't even oil this because it's not like you're trying to take this out and keep it pretty or something. It's maybe oiling would not have been a terrible idea, but whatever. I'm going to break this all up into pieces. So the first thing I have to do is just get it out of the container. And I'll get it onto the board. That's why I put a little bit of flour on the board, so that we don't have everything sticking, because I'm already got a bit of sticking going on here. You can see it's very airy. Try to get as much of it out of here as I can. And then I'm going to break this up into pieces. Very simple. About the size of golf ball or whatever. Walnut, I don't know, something like that. It's really not an exact science. It doesn't matter really. You just want to break it up so that it incorporates well. You can't just plop this whole thing in here, right? So I'm just going to pull off pieces and throw it in here. It's going to be sticky, but that's fine. So like I said, this is going to make 2 breads. So that presents you with an issue, because if you only have one Dutch oven, which most sane people only have one Dutch oven, I have 2, but it's not even mine. I'm borrowing it from my mom, the second one, because I'm making the bread, I'm giving them the bread, so I'm borrowing their other Dutch oven. If you were like my sister, who has, I don't know, maybe like, she's bought all the Dutch ovens. She must own like a stock in Lodge or something. But, she could make like 20 loaves of bread at a time if she had a big enough oven. And, but for most people, they only have one Dutch oven. So, you're going to need to either just make half the dough in the first place, or you're going to have to bake 2 times. And when we get to the baking video, I'll explain, basically, but I can give you an idea, a preview here, which is that you're going to have to preheat that Dutch oven. It's a giant piece of cast iron covered in enamel, right? And you need to get it warm, very warm. So we're talking like 450 degrees. Your final proofing of this dough later on is going to take an hour. So what I do is I put the oven on 450 and I preheat the cast iron, whatever, enamel Dutch oven for that entire hour, which sounds like expensive, but I've looked it up. It's apparently really not that expensive. So the only thing is, if you do 2 loaves and you can't do both Dutch ovens at the same time, you're going to have to bake one. Then you're going to have to let it preheat again. Maybe not an hour. That would be kind of crazy. But, I would give it at least 20 minutes in between just to get it back in the oven, get it warmed up again, because you're going to lose a lot of that heat baking the bread, taking it out of the oven, all that stuff. And that'll be an issue. So it's going to take you a little more time. You just have to plan for it. That's all. Or like I said, make 1 loaf of bread, and then you could even probably stick this whole, the second half of the dough in the fridge and just let it, slow down the fermentation and the and that'll be fine. Yeah, sorry this takes so long, but it's sticky and not that easy to work with. Alright, I got that. I'm going to wash my hands real quick, just because I want to get everything filthy. Alright. And I'm just going to mix this up with my big spatula. Again, just a little bit, just to get these little dough Biga pieces kind of a little bit coated in flour. Alright. We're going to now pour the water in with all this, just like we did before. Pour it all in. Again, I measured out 310-ish grams of water so that it's kind of right in the middle. See how that goes. And I'm just mixing it together with this spatula. It's going to be this big puddle of flour and water here. Just need to get it mixed enough that I can get my hands in there without really becoming coated in gloopy glue. Just takes a second. This is a pretty big, chunk of dough here, so it takes a second to get all the flour hydrated. And then we're going to knead. Kneading here is going to take 10 minutes. Again, if you wish to use a stand mixer, you can do that. It's fine. I've thought about it. When I saw this amount of dough, I was like, oh, geez, that's going to be a lot of work. 10 minutes of kneading that. These little skinny arms here. But it was okay. I did it. And I'm going to do it again. But you can definitely use a stand mixer. It's going to take you a little less time if you use the mixer because it kneads, more efficiently than I can knead. But maybe, instead of a 10-minute knead, you're going to do a 8-minute knead. One of the things, if you're using a stand mixer with any sort of dough, is it really makes the instant yeast really important versus like an active dry, because with active dry, you have to use warm water. With instant, you can use cold water. Not ice cold water, just, tap cold water. And thing is, when you use a stand mixer, it's going to heat up the dough more than your own hand kneading. So when you start heating up the dough, it really is going to affect it. If you use too warm water and then it gets too, the dough gets too warm. So actually using a mixer, your best bet is to actually use, instant yeast and start with tap cold water rather than the warm water, 100 and about 100 degrees, 110 degree water that you would need for active dry yeast. So that's why I like to do this, because then you don't have to worry about it anyway, but that is something to consider. And I'm just putting some flour down here. I'm going to turn this out. It's going to be a little sticky, and I'm going to start kneading. And then I'm probably going to just pause the video for a little bit. I'm going to knead this, and I'll come back to you when it's somewhat together. Because, 10 minutes of kneading, that sounds... I don't want to watch that. So, but I'll get it started, and then I'll show you what we're going to do here. Okay. So here we go. Just got to be careful with it at the beginning. If you have a really big space to work on, you don't have to worry about, things flying around. But in my case, this board is not that big. Like I said, small kitchen, right? So it fits perfectly in this spot. But I, do have to be careful to just not be like flopping it all around. I'll end up with flour all over my kitchen. I don't feel like cleaning that up. It's too much work. It's easier just to be careful at the beginning. Keep your dough on the board. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. It's starting to come together. Might seem on the outside like it's like, oh, this is going to be a little dry, but it's really not. As you press your hand into it, you see like my thumb is sticking. It's not dry. It's just that the outer, flour needs to be hydrated still. It's not totally together. When it starts to knead together with everything in the inside, it should come out pretty nice. I mean, you can't feel through the camera, obviously, but I can tell you that it feels nice and pliable. See, it's starting to get sticky over here. That means that the dry flour is getting itself inside. Remember, just like the Biga, we really want to try to avoid adding too much flour. Keeping a well-hydrated dough, allows you to have a nice, moist crumb. So there's two different parts of bread, the bread baker people talk about. One is the crust. It's pretty obvious. We all know what the crust is. And the crumb is not the big mess all over your kitchen, but rather it is the interior of the bread. So a holy, airy, irregular crumb like you would experience on like a ciabatta, for example, where it's giant air holes where there's irregular shape. That's the result of a very hydrated dough, and something that's kind of handled carefully so that you don't deflate. More uniform, regular old white bread type of thing is definitely a drier, stiffer dough. Or something you experience like in a bagel, for example. It's a very stiff dough. That also is not going to have giant air holes. That would be really weird. Alright, so this is starting to get sticky here. And I'm going to give see it's starting to stick to the board if I leave it there. I'm going to just give the board a little scrape just to get some of this surface. Just using a regular dough scraper here. Yeah, see, it's very stuck. That means we need a little bit more flour. This flour, by the way, bread flour, this particular one is King Arthur. When you buy it in the store, it just says, you know, bread flour. When you get it in bulk, they sell it as special patent flour. So, not a lot of people know that. And so I was actually able to get some online, because for a while I don't think people realized that special patent flour was basically it's just bread flour. 12.7% gluten. And so I was able to, when this whole, couple weeks ago, this whole Corona thing started, I was looking around and everyone was saying, oh man, the stores, no one has flour at all. So I was like, oh well, I better buy some flour, and looked around and I couldn't find all my usual places that have all the bulk flours online. They were all out. It's crazy. I had to search around, but I found a website from Queens that's been selling baking stuff, you know, commercially. Like, you get whole pallets of flour from them. But they also sell individual 50-pound bags. So, bought a 50-pound bag, and it was actually still by the pound cheaper than buying it, you know, at the store. So, at the grocery store, ShopRite. So, I'm able to store it in food grade 5-gallon buckets. It's like 2 5-gallon buckets. Easily fits the 50 pounds. And going through it. So, like I said, my kitchen is kind of small, but very well equipped. But in the winter months, I store stuff in my upstairs, which is like, you know, a finished attic sort of thing, walk-up thing. It's nice, you know, there's no heat up there, it's cool. It's a good place to store things like flour and stuff. But I've also just gotten to my bedroom closet. It has buckets of flour and stuff underneath my clothes. And this is even pre-coronavirus. You know, and I am not opposed to storing food stuff wherever necessary. It's kind of the most important thing, besides my bikes that I own, is food. So yeah, that's what you do. Bedroom closet is filled with flour, but gotta make it work. So, all right. Well, anyway, this is coming together. I'm gonna knead for a while. I'll pause. Come back. And we're going to, I'll show you, we're going to put this in our proofing bowl. Actually, you know what, we're going to divide it first though. And then we'll put it into 2 different bowls, because it's just easier to deal with like that, rather than having to, after it proofs, and then trying to bring it apart into 2 and form 2 balls. It's just, I don't know, I find it easier just to divide it up now. So, that's probably what we'll do. Okay, I'm going to pause. I wanted to bring this closer so that I can hopefully explain a little bit of the kneading, because if you've never kneaded a dough before, you know, you're going to think I'm just, what am I doing here? And I remember the first time I made bread, I really had no idea how to knead. It was ridiculous. This was when I was in college, and it worked out fine, but I had this ridiculous process where I'd like smush it down and fold it over, and smush it down and fold it over, and which is not a ridiculous process. You can knead like that. It works, and actually that's probably like a different technique, but I'm using like the classic, I don't really know what you call it. It's just kind of like the way that I've seen people knead dough, and also clay. My dad, you know, used to be a potter, so I've seen him kneading clay. And basically the concept is, you know, obviously I'm not really pushing it down with my hand, but I just want to show, like, the dough is kind of coming over, and then getting pushed together like this. Oh, it's like slow-mo. I didn't even put it on slow-mo. See? And boom, pushing it down again, and I'm just pressing that seam with my palm. I'm doing it again, and again, and over and over and over and over again. You see what I mean? Really, it's not like some sort of exact science. You don't think, okay, I have to turn it 90. I mean, I am turning it, but it's like a flow you gotta get, and that takes a little bit of time, but basically, the idea is that you just want to incorporate, we're trying to get air in the dough, but the most important thing that happens when you knead is you're developing glutens. I know gluten is like a bad word, but guess what? It's not a bad word. It's a very important word for bread. Otherwise, your bread tastes like, well, I don't even know. I haven't actually ever had gluten-free bread because why? Oh, so anyway, don't even get me started on that. So, yeah, I'm kneading, and I'm just pressing this down, and it's, allowing me to develop these gluten. Gluten is a protein, and it's developed by kneading the strands are I don't know, I'm not getting all scientific about it. If you want to read about it, go find someone that's like much more intelligent about bread than me. They can tell you all about the scientific structures of the gluten and whatnot, but it's a protein, and as you develop it, it's a crosshatch, it's just kind of building up this tension, and that allows when the yeast starts feeding on the sugars in the flour and producing gas, that's what gives you your rise, your lift, your air pockets, right? But it needs something to hold together. Otherwise, if that air can just, it's like air, it's gas, whatever, it doesn't have the structure of the gluten to hold it in place, it ends up, your dough just falls flat. You end up with a loaf of bread that's like big flat thing with no real structure to it. You're not going to get that lift in the oven. It needs to. So there's a lot of recipes out there for the no knead thing. It's fine. I've made them, but I like to knead. I like that chew of the bread that you get from developing these glutens. I think the no knead thing has become really popular because it's easy and it takes a lot of steps out. You don't have to sit here doing this. But there's some age-old saying about things are like nothing is easy, and I don't know what those are at the moment. So I'm not a real purveyor of sayings and whatnot, colloquialisms. So, but the idea is, you got to put some work into it if you want a good result. So that's what I'm doing. It's not that hard. You just got to do it. My mom has been making some bread. She's been using the bread machine thing. And in there, you just throw the ingredients in. It does it all itself, right? You don't have to knead. And that was kind of the allure, I think, for her, which is good. She's got other things to do. And, you come out with a decent loaf of bread. You can use a pre-ferment method with that as well, with a bread machine loaf. I don't know, she's going to try it. I gave her an idea. I can let you know how it comes out. Just develops more flavor. So, alright, how long have I been doing this? It's got to be 10 minutes now. This video is going on for 5 minutes, so I'm going to say it's probably pretty good. I mean, it looks good. You can't see that because of the sun glare. Sorry, well, okay. Hopefully you can see that. It looks good. I'm just going to give it a little dust, just to make my life easier. Just tiny dust of flour. Alright. I'm happy with that. So, now we're back to the bowl here. And no, I didn't clean the bowl, with the flour. It doesn't matter. It's all going to just get incorporated. It gives you a little bit of, something to keep it from sticking. So, here we go. We're going to do our olive oil, very little olive oil here, just to put it in the bowl. roll this dough around. Oh yeah, wait. You know what though? I said I was going to cut it in half. Let me show you. We're going to do that. Let me get another bowl. Hang on. Okay, I got a second bowl here. A little olive oil in there too. Alright, good enough. Well, here's what I want to do. I want to have 2 loaves of bread that are the same size. Okay? So here's how I'm going to do it. I'm going to get my scale. Again. I'm going to put this little cover on here because I'm going to use that to cover the bowl, so may as well. And I'm going to weigh this thing. 1628, so that's 814 grams each. Now, we don't have to get that crazy about it. I'm going to obviously eyeball this, but I just want to have an idea to try to get my, what did I say, 814? Alright, 795, so that means that this one's going to be a bit heavier. Yeah, 833. Alright, you know, I'm going to cut a little chunk, cut a chunk off of this and see if I can get them closer. Yeah, it's probably like half of that. Alright, good enough. I'll just kind of re-knead this in. You'll see this part of the dough here is pretty sticky, the inner part. So that's fine. It's good. It'll help give me a second chance here to just get this incorporated. Do a quick knead into a ball with both of these. Maybe like, a minute or something. Okay, and I'm going to swish this around in the oil. I have to wash my hands there because I got olive oil over my hands and I don't really want to get my dough all gummy while I knead this other ball. So this is actually great because now you get to see 2 different ways that I'm going to do this. The only reason I do this way is because this is what I have. I have one proofing bowl, this big ceramic bowl, so I got to improvise, and that's why I'm using that metal bowl, stainless steel bowl over there. It's about the same size. And again, oil. Alright, cool. That's done. So, last step. We have to cover this. I'm going to do the same method. I got my towel over here. I'm going to soak it with water. Nice and wet. Squeeze it out. Make sure that it's actually all wet. You don't want to have any dry spots where the air can get through more easily. And because then you don't, your dough ends up with a crust on it. We want a crust on it when we bake it, not when we're proofing. That's definitely not good. And this is going to proof for 2 hours until it's, doubled in size. And then we're going to form the loaves. So I'm going to put this towel on my ceramic bowl like that and plop the cover on. Okay, and then here's my other thing you can do. This gives you some options. Remember this for my weighing? Well, this fits perfectly on there. Really nice and like good seal. So I am not worried about crust forming. That's it. I'll see you in 2 hours.